On April 13th, 2026, somewhere in Tampa, Florida, a 26-year-old American man typed a question into ChatGPT. What happens if a human has put a black garbage bag and thrown in a dumpster? The question was grammatically incorrect, but the chatbot understood and told him it sounded dangerous. He typed back, "How would they find out?" 3 days later, two Bangladeshi doctoral students at the University of South Florida, two young people who were quietly planning to spend the rest of their lives together, would disappear. This is the story of those two students. This is the story of Zamil Limon and Nahida Bristy. Hi everyone, welcome to the Desi Crime Podcast, a show where we dive deep into some of the craziest cases from around South Asia. I'm your host Aishwarya.
And I'm Aryaan.
And the case that I have for you today is a recent one. It's an active one. The suspect has been indicted, but a trial is yet to begin.
Aishwarya, I opened my YouTube and all that is plastered on my homepage is this specific case.
Yeah.
And before I clicked on any of those videos, I knew I had to tell you to cover it so that I hear it from the best crime podcaster in the business. So tell me, what is this case that is making the waves right now?
We'll get right into it, but before we do that, all of you, I urge you, go hit the subscribe button, go join our Patreon if you have a little extra money lying around and you want to help us continue to produce this content for you. But I think without further ado, let's get on with the case that has captivated countries' worth of imaginations for a few weeks now. In the early evening of Wednesday, April 16th, 2026, somewhere on the University of South Florida's Tampa campus, a young woman was waiting. She had a pair of eyeglasses in her bag. They didn't belong to her, they belonged to a friend, a chemical engineering doctoral student named Nahida Bristy, who had left them somewhere on the campus earlier in the day and had asked in a quick exchange that morning if her friend could bring them by that evening. The two had spoken in the early hours of the day. They had made a plan. The plan was simple, the kind of plan that gets made and kept hundreds of times every day on a college campus, with the unspoken assumption that of course both people will show up. But Nahida didn't show up. The friend tried calling. The calls went straight to voicemail. The friend tried again, but yet again the same. That same evening, in another part of Tampa, another USF graduate student was trying to reach another friend, a young Bangladeshi man named Zamil Limon, a 27-year-old doctoral student in geography, environmental science and policy at USF. Zamil hadn't been seen since around 9 a.m. that morning when his roommates had last spotted him at his apartment a few blocks from campus. His phone too was going straight to voicemail. He wasn't replying to messages. There was no answer at his door. 8,000 miles away, in Bangladesh, where it was already the morning of April 17th, an older brother named Zubair was trying his younger brother's number. In a different house, in a different city, an older brother named Zahid was trying his younger sister's number. Both brothers were getting voicemail. Both had loved ones at the University of South Florida who that morning had just stopped picking up. By the late afternoon of April 17th, both Zamil Limon and Nahida Bristy had been formally reported missing. A family friend who had been trying for over a day to reach Nahida picked up the phone around 4:50 in the afternoon and called the University of South Florida Police Department. Around the same time, a separate friend reported Zamil missing to the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. Both names were entered into the FCIC and the NCIC missing persons databases, after which the very initial stages of investigation began. USF police visited Nahida's campus workplace and found her lunchbox, her MacBook, her iPad, all things a graduate student carries with her every day and never voluntarily just leaves behind. They then visited the apartment Zamil shared with his two roommates 3 blocks from the USF campus at a complex called Avalon Heights, from where they collected his belongings, his passport, his wallet, and began asking questions. What they did not yet know, what nobody yet knew, was what had happened. Maybe Zamil and Nahida had gone somewhere together and just lost track of time. Maybe there had been an accident. Maybe one of them had had a family emergency and the other had gone with them. Maybe they were just on a long drive somewhere out of cell range. In the first hours of a missing persons case, every soft possibility is still on the table because the alternative, accepting what your gut is starting to whisper, is too painful to hold yet. But by April 23rd, 6 days after Zamil and Nahida had been last seen, the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office had elevated their status from missing to missing and endangered. Missing persons flyers went up on campus and online. Two faces side by side. A young man with an open, easy smile. A young woman in a green and white outfit looking quietly at the camera. Both 27 years old. Both originally from Bangladesh. Both doctoral students at the University of South Florida. Both last seen on the morning of April 16th. If you have any information, please call this number, the flyer pleaded. And the number on the flyer rang. Tips came in, detectives worked, and the families in Bangladesh waited. But before we get into any of that, the investigation into where they really went, the dive teams and the SWAT vehicles and the chatbot logs, I want to take you back. Back to before Zamil and Nahida went missing. Back to the lives they had built and the lives they hope to build together in the future. Because once we get into the part of this story where the noise of the investigation takes over, it's going to be very easy to forget the actual human beings at the center of it. In the fall of 2024, a 25-year-old Bangladeshi man named Zamil Limon landed in Tampa, Florida, and began the slow work of building a life. He was a planner by training. He had studied urban planning and rural planning back home at the Khulna University and had worked as a junior urban planner in the bustling city of Dhaka, a city of nearly 20 million people, where the relationship between land, water, and air is not abstract or academic, but is the difference between a neighborhood that floods every monsoon and one that does not. He had worked with the Center for Natural Resource Studies and with the Center for Environment and Geographic Information Services back in Bangladesh, both organizations that exist because climate change in that country is not a topic of debate. It's a fact you plan around, because the alternative is to plan for displacement. By 2024, he wanted to push deeper into the science of it, and so he flew to Tampa, enrolled in the doctoral program in Geography, Environmental Science and Policy at USF, and moved into a 3-bedroom apartment at Avalon Heights, 3 blocks from campus. The leasing office assigned him 2 roommates, 2 young men he had never met before, and he set about the quiet, deliberate work of making Tampa feel like home. His thesis project was on using generative artificial intelligence to monitor the gradual disappearance of South Florida's wetlands. The work itself was the kind of niche, ambitious, almost philosophically optimistic project that only certain kinds of students choose. He believed in writing that better data could lead to better planning, that better planning could lead to better land use, that better land use could ultimately help the people whose homes flood every season in places like the Bangladesh Delta he came from. He was going to be a professor someday, he had told his older brother Zubair in their long phone calls home. That was the plan. This wasn't a man running away from this country. He was preparing to go back to it smarter, more equipped. His advisor at USF, Professor Mark Rains, runs the Eco-Hydrology Lab in the School of Geosciences. He would later describe Zamil as extremely bright, respectful, and humble, a young man who wanted to make the world a better place. Now that's the kind of sentence that gets said at vigils about almost everyone, because grief is generous. But Zubair, on the other side of the world, in interview after interview since his brother's case, kept reaching for the same simple words to describe him. My brother is a very decent and a very simple person. He always put a smile on his face. Zamil's best friend at USF, a fellow grad student named Umair Hussain, who was connected to Zamil by a professor over email in 2024, called him a chill guy, always jolly, the kind of friend who, in a strange new country, made the strangeness less heavy. Just a year later, in the fall of 2025, another young Bangladeshi PhD student arrived at USF. Her name was Nahida Bristy. She was 26 then, just a few months younger than Zamil. She had studied chemical engineering, first at the Noakhali Science and Technology University in Bangladesh, then at the Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology, the institution that is to Bangladeshi engineering roughly what the IITs are to Indian engineering. Now she was at USF for her own PhD. And like Zamil before her, she was 8,000 miles from her family, working through a strange Florida heat with an umbrella she carried everywhere to shield from the heat, building her own version of a life from scratch. Her advisor at USF, Professor Vinay Gupta of the Department of Chemical, Biological and Materials Engineering, would later speak about her quiet smile, about her love for music and singing, about that umbrella which had quickly become one of those small visual signatures her colleagues recognized her from across a parking lot. Back in Bangladesh, her old vice chancellor at Noakhali Science and Tech University, Professor Muhammad Ismail, would write a formal condolence letter statement that called her a talented and promising student whose untimely death was an irreparable loss to the university and the nation. Words that are not used lightly. Her older brother, Zahid Hassan, would tell CNN that her dream had been simple: to come back to Bangladesh, to work there, to do something big, to contribute to society. It was here, in this context, in that Florida heat, that Zamil and Nahida met. The Bangladeshi student community at USF was warm in a way that diaspora communities are warm. Through the Bangladeshi Student Association, through Bengali-speaking gatherings, through the unspoken solidarity of being homesick in the same accent. They became friends. And then slowly, they became more than friends. According to Zamil's older brother Zubair, by the spring of 2026, the two of them had begun to talk about marriage. They'd spoken about it with their families and had planned to fly back to Bangladesh together that summer to visit their parents, to take a break from the labs and the libraries, perhaps to begin some of the long, slow conversations that precede a wedding in a South Asian family. Zamil had described Nahida to his family as a good girl with a lot of talent, someone who could sing, someone who could cook really well, the kind of detail an older brother passes along when his younger brother is, perhaps without saying so, falling in love. And on the morning of Wednesday, April 16th, 2026, both Zamil and Nahida were in Tampa, going about their ordinary day. Spring was just past its peak in the Tampa Bay area, and the campus of the University of South Florida looked the way college campuses are supposed to look in brochures: green, alive, full of young people walking with backpacks and coffee cups. At 9 in the morning, Zamil was at his apartment at Avalon Heights. His two roommates would later tell investigators that this was the last time they saw him, and that he had nothing on his calendar that signaled anything unusual. He had a meeting later that week with his advisor. He had plans for the summer. All normal. Around noon, according to surveillance cameras, Nahida was seen walking through the Natural and Environmental Sciences building on the USF campus. We know this only because the camera caught it. We know what she was wearing only because the camera caught it, a detail that would become important later, in a way that nobody could have imagined that morning. Sometime later that afternoon, investigators haven't disclosed exactly when, but Zamil and Nahida spoke on the phone, briefly and more than once. Cell tower data places Zamil's phone in the vicinity of his home and the USF campus through the early evening. And then, at roughly 7:43 p.m., his phone moved. It traveled west, away from Tampa, away from the campus, all the way to Clearwater Beach, a 32-mile drive that takes about 40 minutes in moderate traffic. Why? Investigators don't yet know.
Ash, do the investigators by this point know if Nahida traveled with him all the way to the beach where his phone was, or was her phone according to cell tower data, in a different position?
No, they were in different positions. We do know that it was only Zamil's phone that traveled, and one other person's phone from Zamil's circle that was traveling along with his. And we'll get to that, but it wasn't Nahida's phone. According to a motion filed by prosecutors in Hillsborough County Court, a white Hyundai Genesis G80 belonging to one of Zamil's roommates was tracked traveling in the same area within about 10 minutes of Zamil's phone. Phone records and license plate readers, prosecutors say, placed the two vehicles' paths together for much of that night. But this is just the prosecution's reading of the data. Now, the full story of what happened between 7:43 p.m. on April 16th, when Zamil's phone started moving, and the early hours of April 17th is a little confusing. But what is not in dispute is that the morning of April 16th was the last time either Zamil or Nahida was seen alive. And what came after, which is the friend waiting on campus with a pair of eyeglasses in her bag, the calls going to voicemail, the brothers in Bangladesh trying to reach their phones, was already in motion before the day was over. Now I want to take you back to the apartment at Avalon Heights, to what investigators found when they walked through Zamil's door in the days after he disappeared. Because what they found there is what turned this from a missing persons case into a homicide investigation. When USF police arrived at the apartment on Avalon Heights Boulevard on April 17th, the same afternoon the missing persons report had been filed, they collected the obvious things: Zamil's passport, his wallet, but they also did something that most missing persons investigators don't do in the first 24 hours. They collected the apartment trash. Because since the disappearance, they had been interviewing both of Zamil's roommates, and one of them revealed something about the other that just became impossible to ignore. Zamil's third roommate, someone whose name hasn't been disclosed and is only called the third roommate, told inspectors that on the night of April 16th, he had seen his other roommate, a man named Hisham Saleh Abu Garbe, using the building's shared rolling cart to move large cardboard boxes from his bedroom out of the apartment in the direction of the compactor dumpster. Now, a lot of these apartment complexes have these shared carts for moving furniture in and out. They're the most ordinary objects in the world. But that night, in that complex, in that apartment, the cart was carrying something, and the police now wanted to know what it was. According to the affidavit later filed in court, what they found inside those trash bags was not what anyone wanted to see. It contained duct tape, and it contained what appeared to be blood. Investigators didn't yet have a confirmed cause of death. They didn't yet have a confirmed location of death. Hell, they didn't even know if there had been a death. But they had 2 missing graduate students, a lot of blood in the trash, and one roommate who was now about to stop cooperating.
Ash, in these trash bags, is there anything apart from blood, like organs, hands, hair?
No, nothing. I'm guessing what they mean by duct tape and blood is that articles with blood, like routine articles, maybe the duct tape had blood. But there are 2 pieces to this. There's the dumpster, and then there's the compactor dumpster. And both of those will reveal very, very different things and really terrifying things.
Got it. So these aren't bags of blood, but it's just
not bags of blood. Yeah.
Got it.
Over the next several days, the picture detectives were constructing kept getting worse because then they searched the compactor. Inside that trash compactor, they found a black cushioned floor mat stained with blood. They found Zamil's glasses. They found his university ID. They found his credit card. They found Nahida's pink phone case. They found clothing described in court filings as blood-soaked and as containing DNA from both victims. They found, eventually, what investigators allege was substantial blood evidence in the foyer, the kitchen, the hallway, and a bedroom in the apartment. None of this evidence was hidden. None of it had been driven hundreds of miles away and dumped in a remote field. It was sitting in the trash and the trash compactor of the apartment complex where Zamil himself had been living. By April 22nd, 6 days after Zamil and Nahida were last seen, and now with Hisham not cooperating anymore, the police instead began speaking to his mother. According to the prosecutor's motion, she told them that he had a long history of struggling with anger and that he had been violent with family members in the past. And court records actually went on to confirm this. He had been arrested twice in 2023 on battery charges, both later dropped. His brother had filed for a court injunction prohibiting him from approaching their home. That injunction had expired in May of the previous year, and a request to extend it had been made by the family. Whatever was going on in this man's family was at minimum a thing that courts had already been asked to intervene in.
Aishwarya, couple of questions. One, Hisham is therefore not a Bangladeshi citizen.
He's an American citizen.
He's an American citizen of
We
South
don't
Asian
know
origin.
actually. That hasn't been stated explicitly anywhere. It just says an Arab American family. And I looked up the ancestry of the name. It could be anything from a Jordanian family to a Syrian family to a Palestinian family. So we actually don't know.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so there is that element. The other is you and I, listeners are going to call me out for stating it because I apparently state it too often, but we studied in an American college and we too had roommates and flatmates and lived in this kind of a setup with, graduate, undergraduate students all coexisting in the same campus. And I remember it was getting somebody who has mental health issues that can result in violence was an important variable to factor in before placing people together as potential roommates. With so much documentation about this guy's violent history, it is a little surprising that he, the university put him along with other students. I mean, that shouldn't have happened. There are background checks in place. that should prevent something like that, especially when it is documented publicly available information about somebody's violent criminal past.
We're actually going to get to that. Zamil's family will actually file or at least speak very, very vocally about the fact that they want a case against Avalon Heights and the fact that they did place Zamil with someone who had a documented history of violent behavior in the past, who had court orders against him. And I think it's 100% a very, very valid point to make. Whether that responsibility falls on universities when you're placing students in a classroom together and you're placing them in student housing together, or on these housing associations where you're placing people as roommates off campus, whatever it may be, I think that's astronomical responsibility.
Even in off-campus housing, like for example, when I was getting I had flatmates when I lived in New York, and before getting that shared co-living, I think it's called, I had to fill in an extensive form with, any criminal history, my specific, details that they could then run past references and the police system to ensure that I'm a sorted guy. So of course there is responsibility on Avalon Heights, because this is one of those student, housing bodies where you don't get to choose your flatmate or your roommate. So therefore it is incumbent upon the housing society to ensure that the flatmate is one that is compatible.
100%. I think you hear of cases and you can clearly see one point where someone could have done something differently to prevent the end catastrophe. To me, so glaringly in this case, it is that. But now, armed with all of this information, by April 23rd, the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office had elevated Zamil and Nahida's status from missing to missing and endangered while they continued to investigate. Investigators asked Hisham for permission to search his white Hyundai Genesis, and while he wasn't giving police many answers anymore, he did give them this permission. And what the police found inside this car was telling. You see, they found nothing. Like, absolutely nothing. All data on the vehicle had been completely wiped. When detectives sat across from him and questioned him on all of this, his answers shifted. First, he allegedly told them that Zamil and Nahida had never been in his vehicle and that he himself had never been to Clearwater on April 16th. When they confronted him with the location data showing his car in Clearwater, he changed his story. He said he was looking for fishing spots. When they pressed further, he changed it again. Now he said he had driven Zamil and his girlfriend to Clearwater at Zamil's request, and they were both alive when he dropped them off there. When asked about the boxes the third roommate had seen him taking to the compactor, he told detectives he was just throwing out old clothes he no longer wanted. But not only were his answers weird during these interviews, while sitting across from him, the detectives also began to notice scars and cuts and bruises. They noticed his left pinky finger was bandaged, and he told them he had cut it while slicing onions. They noticed a fresh laceration on his left upper tricep. They noticed cuts on both his legs. And if all of this wasn't suspicious enough, the detectives were soon about to get a call that would change everything.
Aishwarya, I just want to say this is one of the stupidest potential killers I have ever come across on the podcast before. His ability to cover up it's abysmal, primarily because this guy has such a stupid explanation for the trivial things. I mean, I would prefer him just saying, I don't know.
My phone was stolen. My car was
remember.
stolen. Yeah.
I don't remember. But him having these very silly explanations that are so succinct, it doesn't line up. It's like his car with the wiped out data.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
I agree. And then that call came in at 9:09 on the morning of Friday, April 24th, 2026. A domestic violence call came in to the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. The address was a home on the 14,000 block of Pine Glen Circle in a Tampa neighborhood called Lake Forest in the area locals call Lutz, just north of the USF campus. The home belonged to the family of Hisham Saleh Abu Garbe. Hisham was already a person of interest in the disappearance of Zamil and Nahida for all the reasons above, but now he was about to become a name in headlines all over the world. According to a court affidavit, a younger female immediate family member of Abu Garbe's had walked into the home's master bedroom that morning to retrieve hair products from the bathroom inside. The door behind was left open. As she crossed the room, she saw him, wearing only a towel around his waist, playing video games. When she tried to leave, he confronted her. He asked her for a hug. She gave him what the affidavit describes as a side hug. And that is when he grabbed her, pulled her into a front hug, and tried to kiss her, telling her, according to the affidavit, to kiss him back. She pushed away. She tried to leave the room, but quickly realized that in all of this confusion, Hisham closed and locked the bedroom door from inside. When she did manage to escape, she ran to her own bedroom, locked herself inside, and called her father. And within 30 minutes, deputies were at the house. Abu Garbe refused to come out. He barricaded himself inside. And so deputies safely removed his family members from the home one by one before finally activating the SWAT team by 10:30 a.m. Then came the bomb disposal squad. Then came the crisis negotiations team. And then the drone response team.
What the hell?
Yeah.
Why all of that taxpayer
Why that
money?
reaction? Yeah. I don't know. Maybe he was already a person of interest. Is it possible this is routine for someone who barricades themselves into a home when police arrives?
I mean, I understand
SWAT team, drone team,
because
crisis negotiation team is, I feel like, a lot.
yeah,
Like,
bomb
kudos to them.
squad? Do you need some precedent for bombs? Like, this is easily $300,000 in taxpayer money gone towards all the resources put towards him.
I genuinely think it might be the fact that he's already a person of interest in the case. And
Could
he has
be,
this
could
history that they know of. And yeah, I don't know. If
I mean,
someone
yeah, okay,
else understands this context better and like wants to shed some light on it, please do.
Yeah, if there's like precedent around, prior cases where so many public resources have been deployed towards one persona non grata, I'd be curious to find out, because this is insane.
Yeah, that's a lot. I would be really, really scared if I was Hisham, which I wouldn't be. But eventually, realizing he was cornered from all sides, Hisham peacefully surrendered and walked out of the home wearing nothing but the same bath towel he had been wearing when his cousin entered the master bedroom 2 hours earlier. But by the time this arrest was taking place and all over the media, something else was happening in a different part of Tampa that was breaking this case open in a second kind of way. The police were standing over a new trash bag. This time, one with a body inside. You see, by that morning of Hisham's arrest, detectives had already been tracking his phone. Phone records had shown them that in the early morning hours of April 17th, between 1 a.m. and 4:30 a.m., his phone had crossed the Howard Franklin Bridge, the long causeway that connects Tampa to St. Petersburg across Old Tampa Bay, then turned on the Pinella side, came back east, and stopped on the shoulder. He did this twice. There was no reason for any phone to stop in those locations on a bridge at that hour. On the morning of April 24th, right as that 911 call was coming in, detectives from the case went to the exact spot where the phone had stopped and began searching the shoulder of the neighborhood lanes. They smelled it before they saw it. Sitting on the side of the highway, just off the inside lane, was a black, heavy-duty trash bag. The northbound lanes of the bridge were shut down for hours as detectives recovered what was inside: the body of Zamil Limon. He had been bound at the wrists and at the ankles. He had been stabbed multiple times. One of the wounds had penetrated his liver. And in a detail Sheriff Chad Conister would later disclose at a press conference, his legs had been almost completely severed so that his body could be folded over and made to fit inside the bag. Conister's own phrase was that Zamil had been, quote, literally left on the side of the highway like a piece of trash, end quote. Nahida Bristy was still missing, but just 2 days later, on April 26th, a kayaker out fishing in Old Tampa Bay near the Pinellas County side of the Howard Franklin Bridge felt his line catch on something in the mangroves. It was another black trash bag, partially hidden in the roots. The body inside was so heavily decomposed that it would take forensic investigators several days working with DNA, dental records, and the clothing the body was still wearing. Clothing that matched the surveillance footage of Nahida's last walk through the Science Building on April 16 to confirm her identity. Sheriff Chad Conister announced the identification on May 1st. At the press conference, he did not mince words. Quote, the details of this investigation are gruesome, and the actions of the suspect are nothing short of pure evil, he said. He also said something that weeks later has not changed. He said that at that point, investigators did not know the motive. The why, he said, they don't know. As of the recording of this episode, that is still true. There is no publicly confirmed motive. The cause of death for Nahida Bristy has also not been publicly confirmed. Maybe her remains were far too advanced in a state of decomposition, or at least the sheriff has declined to disclose these findings to the public. We also don't know yet whether she died in the apartment or somewhere else. We don't know yet what she saw before she died. Investigators haven't publicly disclosed the sequence of the two killings either, whether Zamil died first or Nahida or at the same time. The sheriff has said only that the two were killed around the same time and in the same place, and even that, he has acknowledged, needs to be further investigated. But also in this press conference, Sheriff Chad Conister said something that no American sheriff has ever quite had to say before, at least not in this way. He said that one of the most important pieces of evidence his detectives uncovered didn't come from a witness. They didn't come from a phone call. They didn't come from a surveillance camera. They came from a chatbot. It came from artificial intelligence. According to prosecutors' filings on April 13, 2026, 3 days before Zamil Limon and Nahida Bristy were last seen, Hisham opened ChatGPT on his phone and typed in a question. The question, court documents allege, was, "What if a human has put a black garbage bag and thrown in a dumpster?" The chatbot, according to the same filings, responded that it sounded dangerous. Hisham then typed his follow-up. How would they find out? Investigators have not, as of this recording, publicly released the chatbot's full response to that second question. They have, however, made clear that this exchange is what they are pointing to as direct evidence of premeditation. And the ChatGPT history, prosecutors say, did not stop there. Over the days that followed, Hisham allegedly searched for related topics, including at one point scenarios involving whether someone could survive a gunshot to the head and whether neighbors might hear gunfire. 3 days after that first chatbot exchange, on the morning of April 17th, the morning after Zamil and Nahida were last seen, he asked ChatGPT another question. According to the affidavit, this one was about whether cars were checked at Hillsborough River State Park. On the same morning, he searched for what the legal phrase missing an endangered adult actually meant. But turns out, the premeditation did not stop with chatbot searches. According to prosecutors, the planning was not just conversational, it was logistical. Going as far back as April 7th, more than a week before Zamil and Nahida were last seen, Hisham allegedly placed a series of orders on Amazon. The order included duct tape, trash bags, lighter fuel, fire starter, and then in the hours after the killing, around 10:30 p.m. on April 16th, a DoorDash order was placed from his phone for more trash bags, Lysol wipes, and Febreze air fresheners from a nearby CVS. The order, according to prosecutors, was delivered to the apartment door about 30 minutes later. Roughly an hour after that, the third roommate would see him wheeling cardboard boxes out towards the compactor.
Never have I come across a more guilty murder suspect in the history of covering Desi crime. I will say, however, I think it's worth updating our listeners as the investigation goes further, because what's going to be really crucial between premeditated murder and a crime of passion are the timelines, from when the murder took place, the order in which the murder took place, was the DoorDash before or after the murder. All these things will play a crucial role in the sentencing. And given that this took place in Florida, if I'm not mistaken, Florida still has the death penalty.
It does.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be really interesting to find out what exactly was this guy's motive, because frankly, up until this point, I just thought this is like a mentally insane individual with a case of anger management issues that are pathological.
No.
But that wouldn't explain premeditation
Up
at
until a week
the
ago.
level.
Yeah. Now, when investigators presented Abu Garbe with the evidence they had gathered, he was, in Sheriff Conister's words, non-reactive, callous, showing no emotion. Hisham Saleh Abu Garbe, 26 years old, was a former USF student himself. He had attended the university between the spring of 2021 and the spring of 2023, pursuing a bachelor's degree in management. He did not graduate. By the time of his arrest, he wasn't even enrolled. USF's president, Moez Limayem, had confirmed publicly that the suspect was born in the United States and is a US citizen. His public defenders have declined to comment on the case so far, but he is presumed innocent. He has a right to a fair trial. And what I'm narrating here, what investigators have alleged in their court filings, is what he has been accused of, not what he's been convicted of. On May 8, 2026, a Hillsborough County grand jury indicted him on 2 counts of first-degree premeditated murder with a weapon, 2 counts of unlawfully holding or moving a dead human body in unapproved conditions, 2 counts of failure to report a death to a medical examiner or law enforcement, and a count of tampering with physical evidence. The same week, the Hillsborough State Attorney's Office, led by State Attorney Susie Lopez, filed a formal notice of intent to seek the death penalty. The aggravating factors prosecutors cited were 3. First, that the killings were committed in a cold, calculated, and premeditated manner, that the crimes were especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel, and that the defendant had committed multiple homicides during the same criminal episode. He was scheduled to be arraigned on May 18, 2026. And as we record this episode on May 19th, news has just come in from a few hours ago that he has pleaded not guilty, with a jury selection to begin on November 3rd, 2027. Clearly, it's going to be a long road ahead to the truth, if we even find it at the end. On May 9th, 2026, at the University of South Florida's spring commencement ceremony, 2 doctoral degrees were conferred posthumously. The university announced the decision through a letter sent to the Bangladeshi consulate in Miami, and a representative of the consulate was invited to attend the ceremony to receive the honors on behalf of the bereaved families in Dhaka. That same day, by what feels like one of those coincidences that the world arranges only when it's trying to break your heart, the body of Nahida Sultana Bristy was scheduled to arrive in Dhaka. Zamil's body had already been flown back. Both of them were buried in accordance with Islamic rites, which their families had requested be observed at every step. At the doctoral graduation ceremony, the university placed 2 empty chairs at the front of the hall. The vigil on campus on May 1st, the same day the sheriff announced that Nahida had been identified, drew hundreds and hundreds of people. Professor Mark Rains, Zamil's advisor, spoke. Professor Vinay Gupta, Nahida's advisor, spoke. USF's president spoke and said to the families watching from Bangladesh by video the only thing that can really be said in those moments. He said, "Your children mattered here. They belonged here." The families issued a joint statement calling on the university and on law enforcement to seek the highest possible punishment under the law and for the legal process to move forward quickly. They asked that Zamil and Nahida's belongings, every single item exactly as it be found, be returned to the families in Bangladesh. They asked that any remaining stipends or bank balances be transferred home. They asked for a permanent memorial on campus so that future students would know who Zamil and Nahida had been. But they also asked for something more pointed. Like I said, they asked the university to take appropriate legal action against Avalon Heights, the apartment complex where Zamil and Hisham had been roommates. They raised questions about how a roommate had been assigned without proper background checks. But I'm guessing, and this is just my guess, that the biggest thing they want from the authorities is an answer to the question why. We still don't know why. There has been no domestic dispute between Hisham and either of the victims. There has been no romantic triangle alleged in court filings. There has been no financial dispute, no academic dispute, no roommate quarrel that anyone has yet placed on the record. There is just the alleged premeditation, the chatbot searches, the Amazon orders, the supplies at the apartments, and that's it. Whatever was unfolding inside Hisham Abu Garbe's head during those days, investigators haven't quite yet been able to figure out. The trial may, or it may not. Some questions about Zamil Limon and Nahida Bristy just may never be answered. But what we do know is what they were. Zamil was a young man who studied wetlands, who wanted to teach, who told his brother about a girl he thought he might marry. Nahida was a young woman who loved chemical engineering and sang to herself, who carried an umbrella against a sun that wasn't her son, who told her own brother that her dream was to come home one day and make a difference. They were friends, and they were more than friends. They were 2 people for whom 2 empty chairs sat at a graduation hall and now will sit in their families' homes forever. The story is still unfolding, and we will come back to it as it does. Until then, stay safe, stay crazy, and stay desi. If you like what we do here at Desi Studios and absolutely love what we're wearing today, this is merch you can go buy all for yourself.
You can buy this Desi Crime merch in our YouTube store on the link down below at Kadak Merch. Keep the engines at Desi Studios rolling so we can pay our videographer right behind the camera to make these amazing episodes just for you.